And of course, the ongoing and terrible mishandling of child and youth services in BC, leading first to a report by Bob Plecas, which was itself so controversial that it led to a 77-page response by a very angry BC representative for children and youth, Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafond. That's not even a complete list. I'm only stopping because we have the rest of the show to do. In 15 minutes, we're going to talk again with David Eby of the NDP about all of this. But for now, let's look a little closer at what's happening with the BC Ministry of Children and Family Development. Here to walk us through the problems that led to the Plecas report and what was so wrong with it that Turpel-Lafond had to respond is Adrienne Montani, a provincial coordinator with First Call, a BC child and youth advocacy organization. Ms. Montani, who is Bob Plecas? Why was his report commissioned? And why is Turpel-Lafond so angry about it?
Bob Plecas is a former deputy minister with the government a long time ago, but he's currently a contractor with the government. Brought in to initially, ostensibly, to review a child protection case that went to court, where the ministry was found to be egregiously in the wrong and to have placed children in harm's way and breached their duty of care and protection for them. So there's a court case. And so he was brought in ostensibly to look at what went wrong in the ministry, that the ministry staff and the role they played in that court case was allowed to happen. That has not happened because there's ongoing litigation and stuff. So in the meantime, he wrote a report that had a number of things that were not in his mandate to do, one of them being to go off on a tangent to basically try and undermine the monitoring role of Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafond, the representative for children and youth. It's a shoot-the-messenger tactic. So it's like he's written a report that was, while it has some good recommendations and acknowledges one of the key things, which is that the ministry is incredibly underfunded and has been for decades, but it takes potshots and mischaracterizes the role of the Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafond's office. And in some ways, the fact that he was hired at all to do that is questionable because it's her role, her office's legislated role, to do this kind of review of what's gone wrong when the ministry messes up.
Well, and that leads, of course, to all sorts of political questions. But Turpel-Lafond's response, that which I have read of it, isn't merely a defense of her position or a defense of her office. No. She has a lot of criticisms of the Plecas report. Absolutely,
yeah. So that, as I said, that the part of his report that went after her was really uncalled for and wasn't even part of what he was supposed to do. And one wonders why. That's why he did that. But the part that he was supposed to look at was the policy and procedures and that kind of thing. And when you do a thorough review that is then the minister has said she's listening to and going to spend money on, and you don't do a thorough consultation, so part of what the representative's office is so upset about is the fact that there was no consultation, and this has been weighed in on by First Nations leadership throughout the province. They were not consulted in this adequately. Lots of people, including the representative's office, were not consulted, and she's been trying to get access to the documents that he relied on. What was the extent of his consultation? And that's where they're being quite secretive and saying she doesn't now have the statutory authority to. So there's this legal fight pending about whether or not she can even see the documents on which he has founded his report. So when you read the report, when I read the report, I found it quite unprofessional in many parts, sweeping generalizations about people, about who's blaming who, and so parts of it are just as if he is inserting his own opinions as opposed to a more professional. These are the facts. This is what we found, and it may just point to that the representative is right, that he didn't do a very thorough consultation at all in preparing the report, and yet comes up with recommendations off the top of his head.
Dear listeners, if you're interested, Bob Plecas' report is available. You can just Google Bob Plecas report. It's there. To me, it reads more like a polemic than any kind of scholarly work. Yeah. Just if I can put on a pundit hat for just a second, I'd ask a rhetorical question when it comes to Plecas' attacks on Turpel-Lafond's job, and that rhetorical question would be, be what deputy minister wants independent oversight. Of course, he says we don't need it because the bureaucrats will say, no, we're fine all by ourselves. You certainly don't need to be watching what we're doing. Let's not get lost in the weeds. This is all because children and youth are not being well served by the ministry, and it's really shockingly bad. Yeah. Your organization are advocates for children and youth, so perhaps you can make this relevant for us and just outline how the ministry is failing children and youth that are in need.
Well, I think I want to start at the top because that's where the direction comes from. Because, of course, we're looking for this ministry to be a champion. Its mandate, its legislated mandate, is to provide child protection and support for families, but for protection for some of the most vulnerable children in the province, children and youth. And when it fails in that, there are dire consequences, as many of Mary Ellen Trapelafon's reports have illustrated. But it really starts at the top. In the mandate letter to the minister, if I was the Minister of Children and Family Development, I would have been dismayed to receive that letter from the Premier. Number one priority is balance the budget and help the province balance its budget. Not make sure kids are safe, make sure we have the best system of child protection and family support services we can. It's more balance the budget. And that message is reinforced in the Plecas report with a lot of talk about changing public perception, and that's why they want to get rid of external oversight with some kind of internal PR person. So it's all the problem is not public perception. The problem is the failure of this ministry to be adequately resourced to do its job. Children are being warehoused in residential care with untrained staff sometimes, and certainly inadequate resources. And I don't want to blame the frontline people. They're doing the best they can, and many of the nonprofits that are contracted to provide those services are doing the best they can, but they're not getting enough money to do a good job. Social workers are overburdened. The ministry has trouble recruiting and retaining child protection social workers. Some of those things are outlined in the Plecas report, but these are things that have been said for years, and we're looking for the minister of the day of this ministry to stand up for these kids and go back to cabinet and go back to the Premier and says, no, my first priority is not balancing the budget, not for this ministry. My first priority is protection of children and youth and make sure they're healthy, and we do our best by them.
Well, I guess that it depends on whether you see the people that live in British Columbia as citizens or consumers, and if the business of government is business, going back to the 1950s with that one, then it is all a matter of balancing the budget. And I guess again to put on a pundit hat, if everything is political, then everything is perception. Even the care of children becomes a question of perception and a question of dollars and cents, rather than simply no, we got to do this before we do anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. We have an obligation under the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, and just a moral obligation to respect children's rights to safety and not scrimp on their care while they're growing up. And when we become the parent, when we take them into foster care, then they deserve the best we can give them. And saying they have to wait till the economy grows, that's an old line that's been used for decades when the economy's been doing well. Right now, the economy is doing relatively well, as the Premier is constantly telling us. And yet, still, children aren't on the priority list, and vulnerable children aren't on the priority list. So it's a matter of political will to do the right thing by children.
Adrienne Montani, if people want to know more about you and your organization, how do they find you?
We're at firstcallbc.org. It's First Call BC Child and Youth Advocacy Coalition. Just Google us. We're based in Vancouver, but our members we have 95 or more member organizations around the province who work in various ways with children.
Ms. Montani, it was such a pleasure to have you on, and I would like to have you back sometime to talk about First Call at length and talk about child advocacy issues. Thanks for being here.
Welcome the opportunity. Thanks very much.